My name is Jungwon Kim. I go by she, her pronouns. And I am part of the leadership collective at the Slow Factory, working with just an incredible team to cause good trouble and shake things up, especially with regard to the fashion sector and all of the different sectors that it touches, calling attention to and redesigning really harmful systems. One of our mottos is that everything you make returns to the earth as either food or poison. And that's one of our kind of guiding philosophies about everything we do. Our Open EDU program, it's one of our core offerings. We feature really just talented and wise and really forward-thinking experts in various fields spanning fashion and so much more. Our instructors are from the global majority. They approach their work from an anti-colonial perspective and are really here to help us think about old dysfunctional systems in new ways. Excuse me. So today, our instructor is Makayla Wray. Makayla Wray's artistic medium is fashion design, and she is drawn by everyday lifestyles, experience, music, art, and culture. She is joining us from the East Village of Manhattan, aka Lenape territory as well. And she also works in the same neighborhood near her East Village home, where you can see the incredible creations that she makes. So without further ado, I would love for you to take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Makayla, as you know. I put this together to kind of like help share the things that I do and like why I got into it and kind of like a step of how I go about rebuilding. That's typically what I do every day is help kind of like rebuild scraps and wasted materials into new products that you're able to like have and keep forever. So hop on into it. Okay, so my mindset kind of really started to change kind of in college when I also was working on the manufacturing line, kind of firsthand seeing how much waste was going into just producing the clothing, and then just seeing how it was just kind of like getting discarded. In school, this was a quote that another classmate shared with me from Tom Ford, and it's just like the fact that I could see that a designer that I like loved, just really thought that this art form that I was attracted to was only being sold, marketed, and used to be discarded. And that was just something I just always sat around with me. And that's when I kind of like really started stepping into really thinking about how I can upcycle what was around me. And then also for like my own designs, how I can always like keep recycling what I have so that I'm not throwing anything away. This is kind of like my little layout of the steps that I do for like rebuilding and how I kind of like repeat all that. One thing that I do outside of my own design, I run a alteration cart for mending, repairing, upcycling, almost anything for the neighborhood. Just if anything comes to mind that you feel like you have something in your closet that you no longer want, but there's something that you want to like gain and get like buy into, maybe we can like together work to, make it come to life. All right, so the cart, there was my two main missions for putting together the cart was one, obviously, for upcycling the wasted materials, and then also I really wanted to point out that like me coming from the assembly line, I kind of like understand like what manufacturing can kind of like do to a person, and kind of like the disrespect within the industry kind of doesn't like look at us like, they look at us like machines. So I kind of started the cart so that, you know, you had like no door, because obviously it's outside, so that you can like ask like random questions that you might not have like wanted to go and ask like another tailor to do, and then also kind of have a one-on-one like conversation with somebody from this side of the industry. Rebuilding projects is something that I pushed the most through the cart. I gave an example of one that's actually very daring to me, which was Helen asked me, was I able to upcycle her husband, who passed away from COVID last year, his favorite shirt. So if you see like the process of the shirt, it started just of his favorite flannel, that's Jim, leaning on the car. That's Helen holding the elephant, which we chose as the animal of choice to be the rebuild project. It, you know, she needed to get rid of his clothes. It wasn't, you know, healthy to hold on to everything, but she wanted to have something that could be, you know, that she can keep comfortably like forever. And what I like about rebuilding projects is that like I kind of look at all waste and materials as a like, you know, a foundation to become something. A lot of people feel like you should only alter like really expensive clothes, really like well-made clothes. But at the end of the day, like we have companies have been producing things for years, and we have to figure out a way to keep it from going into the landfill. And just my rebuild projects is kind of like how I feel that I'm able to approach any type of material that is given to me to give it like new life. How I start my rebuild projects, I really start with like pattern design and a blueprint of how I'm going to approach it. I think you have to think about before you are going to cut the materials, just to know like what else is already kind of like out there, map out and plan. Working for designers, I can see it's usually sometimes they'll like find like their inspiration and find fabric, and they'll cut it and they'll be like, oh, well, this didn't kind of work out, so let's start again. And after like 5 samples in the design room, you just have a bunch of wasted muslins and just like samples that are not going to hit the runway and no longer going to be sold. So I feel like really stepping back and kind of like planning out before you actually approach cutting something is like very important. And then you also kind of like can know exactly what you have. This particular project was a leather jacket that my uncle actually gave me. I get a lot of hand-me-downs. That's kind of like how I really got into like rebuilding my own wardrobe, was really remixing what I was like given. So I've used a bunch of scrap of leathers that was from other previous projects that I had sold, and I just like kept all the scrap for materials. And eventually when I accumulated enough, I then planned out how I was going to approach like my own jacket to kind of like give it new life. There was tons of holes in it. Eventually it looked like this, where I just kind of like cut out all of the scrap pieces to save exactly like what I needed to have to like rebuild and rebring life into my jacket. And at the end of it, I was able to actually make these patches that during the riots last year, that I was able to use all the tiny scraps to build something more. And then eventually I was able to like donate this proceeds to foundations, just literally from scrap. So I'm very much like save it. Eventually you might be able to use it. My next, then, like I said, I get into sourcing of materials. And that's kind of like I said, like I get a lot of things from friends and family. When I really started like in school, looking to like buy materials, I was looking at secondhand stores, estate sales, flea markets, like eBays. If you're really looking for some like very beautiful textiles, like there's amazing tablecloths that are on Etsy. And eventually, as I was doing this for my own brand, Ma, is when I started being able to approach bigger brands and then also them approach me. The two examples that I have was in 2020, Alpha Industry approached me on how I was going to be able to redesign their traditional bomber jacket. I knew a few things about the brand and like knew that like the bomber jacket was one of their like biggest things. They started it and they've been making it for years. So I instantly thought there has to be years of waste. I asked them, could I have, their wasted materials to be able to rebuild their traditional silhouette. In the project, I actually, if you see the teddy bear, that was actually a buildup of all the scraps left over. And I had zero waste in this project because the bear is actually extremely heavy due to the fact that I stuffed everything I was like left with inside of it. It stays here next to me. And yeah, I kept the pockets, I kept the original collars from previous jackets, and just really just like patch up everything together until I get enough of a foundation to be able to like cut out and then, you know, continue. The Levi project that is shown, I really had to do the backdrop, which again, when Levi's approached me to do this project, I asked if I was able to have their design studio waste. If anybody have worked in a design studio, sometimes you'll get back references and you'll cut a hole in it because you need the color or you need like the just like that half of the silhouette just so that you can go into production. And I just, from my experience, I was just like, I want to have this from your studio. I made the backdrop. It got shot for their campaign, and then I kept every inch of the backdrop left back with me because I knew eventually I was going to use it again. A few sewing techniques that I like to do my patching to save my materials is I do it like just a lot of patchwork, a lot of mending, and the zigzag stitch and darning are my main go-to. I kind of enjoy, like, if it looks a little like chaotic, as long as it flows like nice and has like a well balanced, like if there's a lot of seams on this, then maybe I will like remove it from a different area. My example here was this is eventually became a bucket hat where it's around the brim is a little bit more bare. I use the waistband from a pair of pants, which also came from the backdrop, to do like the band around the head. And then I also used the, you know, multiple pockets, that's the front fly, to do the cap of the hat. I also did share my needles. I always feel like that's a very big question. Like 16 is usually my go-to when I'm doing a lot of rebuilding. Darning, if anyone knows the technique, is just a buildup of you sew over like a hole or an area and builds up the threads so that it kind of can remake the woven material that is no longer there. It gets very like hard and dense for the needle to go through. So I do use the 16 or like a 14 leather needle. So that is able to really go through the fabric well, and you won't have like broken threads. So just, gonna have that. And then my scaling scraps and repeat. This is what turned into, these are what actually is the backdrop that you're looking at. When I got approached from Complex and Levi's to do another collab, I knew that I already had a ton of materials. I also suggested, could I even have a little bit more for the amount that I needed to produce for them to sell. I started doing my project as like kind of like a pyramid, is how I try to basically scale the amounts that I can get. I always get a lot of friends and peers that want to like get into the same thing and are just like, well, how do I leave from doing one of one, and how am I able to build like full collections off of like waste? Like when you're working with waste, unfortunately, it's kind of like you have to use what you get. So what I already knew that I had, I just kept repeating and redoing all my techniques that I was able to get more without having any waste. So I started with the pair of pants that I was able to patch the bottom. That these came from the design studio, so the legs were cut off for references. I repatched those so that they can then be resold just as pants. As my scrap pieces got smaller, my silhouettes got smaller, where I then was able to produce handbags. And then when they were very tiny, I went into my soft goods. Soft goods is definitely a way that I love to save my scraps from any really material, from flannel to denim to leather. I've been able to get a very, very fun and very creative with what I'm trying to get out. I've only was able to keep one little cowl, which this was a jean jacket at one point. And this is the front pocket. I was able to reuse like every piece of it to kind of keep the original label that came on the pants, jacket. And I also was able to, I used the same silhouette to make a leather bag version. And again, this was all scraps. Like it's just been things that I've collected through the years, and I'm able to continue to repeat and save and thinking with what I have before I go and look for anything new is just something that I really feel like is important as designers to kind of look at, and also to think of not about getting rid of it. I don't want anybody to get rid of anything that I make. I want them to keep it together like forever, and that's the type of passion that I put into like every piece that I make. So is there any questions?
Hi, thank you, Makayla. We do have some questions that have come from our audience, but
Okay.
before we get into that, I actually have a question for you too.
Yeah.
First of all, I started weeping when you showed the piece of the plaid shirt of the husband who had passed away. And also, hello, Antonio. I just wanted to shout out that we have a new interpreter, ASL interpreter, who has joined us. So anyway, when I saw that piece and you mentioned that, you know, this woman had come to you and wanted to turn this part of his wardrobe into something, and then you made it into an elephant, I just burst out into tears. That is just so touching and so beautiful. And it kind of got me thinking about how, I mean, in addition to being a designer and an artist and just a sort of incredible, magical seamstress, you're really a storyteller too. I mean, people are coming to you with the raw material of life, and giving you a story and then asking you to kind of take their story to a new place, right? That might be a place of healing. It might be turning something from one part of life into a gift for someone in another part of their lives, for example. And so I just really wanted to ask you to share a little bit about the emotional journey that you go through with some of these pieces, you know, as you're telling a story. And before you respond, would you mind closing your presentation mode so that we can just see you on the screen?
Okay. How do I do that? Sorry. Okay. Is it just me?
Let's see. Oh, well, they're saying you can just leave it, actually. Let's see.
Right. I can go back to the pedal slide.
Sure.
To talk more.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This is. Okay. Yeah, honestly, the card is actually super emotional. Um, it was really when I lost my job during the pandemic. Uh, I I had a lot of free time. One of my biggest freelance jobs in New York was doing onset tailoring. So I would do onset tailoring. It was just always like it was on call. So to usually have like a better like control of my money in the morning, I was a barista, and I was working on a cart for a barista called Peddler. And then in the like midday by like noon, I would probably be leaving to go and work for as you know as a seamstress for other people. Um, Obviously, when I lost my job last year, um, me and Byron, who runs Peddler, we're just kind of like talking, and we're just like, you know what, maybe we should do something together. Like we had so much time, and then I really thought the cart was going to be kind of more of like an installation. It's kind of like how I wanted to present it. Was just more. I was parked underneath originally the Calvin Klein ad to have like to show like big brands selling, and then like young designer trying to like not sell but just kind of like save. So the location that we chose in Soho, and then I was just there, and it kicked off, and so many people were reaching out to me, just like with the same mindset, with the same um, viewpoints, and then also some people would just be walking past with curiosity and just be like, "Are you really selling here on the street?" And I was just like, "That's exactly what I'm doing." And it just opened so much more conversation, and then as different people would like come, they probably were so nervous to ask. Like I would get people all the time being like, "Oh, well, I'm not like a designer, like I never went to design school, so I don't really know." And I'm just like, we all know what we want, especially like getting dressed is something we do every day. And it's just it's we're kind of like sold and conditioned to be to be consumers. And I just kind of wanted people to get a little bit more affirmations of like what they would usually get getting something new from a store, from getting it within like their own home, from their own closet. And usually with like nostalgia is something that a lot of people bring to the cart, where they're just, this is my grandmother's. One project that I'm finishing up was a young woman got a bunch of her grandmother's skirts that passed, and we shortened them to like fit her style for today. And all the scraps of the hems, we are making a handbag, so that the handbag can then match with all of the skirts. I get so many of those stories, and it's something that I really like love for the cart, and reason why I continued it even after like last summer and things kind of like started opening up and go back to normal, that I still after work go out in the evenings to kind of like help people kind of like start start this conversation and start this movement to like saving the stuff. And if I'm not able to do it, my years in the industry allows me to kind of also direct people to other people like myself, or even there's so many manufacturers that are in New York still that are slowly or fastly losing business because of everybody wanted to, like big brands wanting to save a buck and wanted to do everything overseas. And there's so many people that I've met in the industry that have been sewing and doing the same thing for the last 20 years. They love it, and they're losing their job because of somebody wanting to like save a buck. It's something that I could never really like comprehend. Sewing is something that I'm very like passionate about. I'm very like, I think it's one of the coolest trades, and so many people kind of just look at it as like a machine. And I just really wanted to change the narrative that sewing involves somebody's hands like
Yes.
throughout the whole process. And the industry, like I'll be like working with different factories and with different designers, and the seamstress or the tailor that has been there for years is not invited to their the fashion week parties. They're not invited to the big dinners. And it's just something that I'm just like, I don't know when the narrative of being like a sewer lost, like it's like cool and it's like respect. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like it's nuts. So I feel
You,
like the cart really helps.
yeah, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps because first of all, my paternal grandmother was a seamstress. And
Really?
yeah, she was a professional seamstress and she sewed traditional Korean formal hanbok. And also when she lived with us for like 15 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so for all that time, whenever we had anything, fall apart, she was always there to not just repair it, but also alter and make things
Mm-hmm.
for us. So we were really, really fortunate in that way. Um, what you said was so deep because I think the fact that you are sewing and remaking things in public in the heart of this sort of fashion marketing consumerism beast of Soho
Yeah.
is what I see is a kind of performance art. In addition to doing the craft and creating something, you're also doing a kind of performance art that is shifting the narrative of the hidden labor that
Mm-hmm.
goes into fashion. And over these last several decades, we've had this sort of there's a segmentation of labor, there's the sort of factory, and the workers become almost like part of a factory. They're not even really
Yeah.
people anymore. And then all of that labor is, now overseas. So I
Mm-hmm.
think what's really incredible is that you're bringing this back into public view and kind of reminding people that sewing is, not just very skilled labor, but also in many cases a labor of love and and an art as well. So I just want to say, definitely really, really impressed by, I don't know if it was a sort of intentional move on your part or if it's just the way things worked out, but the way that you've kind of created this performance aspect to change the narrative. One thing I wanted to note, there are lots of questions popping up in the chat and also
Mm-hmm.
in the Q&A, kind of like how can I learn this? I noted that you're formally trained,
Yes.
in art school. And so you had a sort of structure to learn these skills. But one of the things about Open EDU and the reason that we really keep it free is that school and sort of traditional academic education in a college or university or art school setting is
Mm-hmm.
not affordable to everybody, not accessible, and in many cases often deeply problematic and colonial, depending on the institution. Are there some resources that you could point people to where, if they don't necessarily have the time or space or resources to go and get formal training, that they might be able to learn how to do this? Because I'm going to be real. I've tried sewing things too. And if you don't have the skills, you're just going to create more waste. Like
Yeah.
thing that I tried to do, I botched terribly and I had to just get rid of it because I couldn't figure out how to save it. So what are some resources you would direct people to?
Well, YouTube University is amazing.
Ah,
I still refer to YouTube for everything from usually Welt Pockets is I feel like for some reason I always go right through my like head. I'm just like, all right, gotta redo a Welt Pocket, relearn it. And that's just one thing that never sticks with me.
a what? A welt
Um,
pocket? What did
a
you say?
Welt Pocket.
A welt pocket?
Yes, like a Welt Pocket's usually in the back of like men's like trousers. It's
Okay.
just like the little welt. Like for
Oh,
some
yes.
reason, that is like the hardest thing for me.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I think yeah, it's I feel like when you really start sewing, I feel like it is kind of good to kind of use a lot of different materials to kind of like figure out like some people are really good at like sewing more knit. There's a lot more people that are better at wovens. I actually have a very like heavy grip, which makes me good at like sewing a lot of like leather. I
Mhm.
also I love what I liked about the material. I couldn't like there's so much poly that also goes into like fake material. I'm like I'm either going to discard wearing this at all, or, use this material, which a lot of it still comes from like the food industry. But I do like that I'm able to break it down into like smaller pieces, which it's like I can start from a jacket. One that I like did like last year was actually like my old rug. I had like a cowhide rug that was in my living room. I moved and it no longer fit into like my new apartment downtown. And I upcycled that into a jacket for me to wear in the winter. And all the smaller pieces I was able to use as I made accessories for like my family.
Oh,
But
everything that you mentioned, I want to see it. I mean, I don't know if it's like right behind, if it's right there and we can look at it. Maybe you could share it on your Instagram or something like that. But
I will, yeah.
And that brings me to another interesting question that some people have mentioned too is, especially in New York City and in Manhattan, like the space is small. And, so how do you have any tips for people who maybe don't have a lot of storage space? If you're sort of working with like just a small amount of material that you have at any given time, how do you plan, or is it always an improvisation? So the sort of two related questions: how do you deal with storage for all of this found material? And then secondly, if you don't have space to store a million things, do you see this more as an improvisation, or is there a way to kind of make a project a plan into the future? Let's say if you're going to make like 3 or 4 or maybe 10 pieces in one theme.
Yeah, no, storage is definitely a really big issue living in New York. I have a storage unit that I keep all of my materials and scraps. I have organized them from like colored material they're broken up between knits, wovens, and leathers. And then I have like color things where I know what's in my storage unit. So I'm just like not looking at a bin. It's very useful on the cart because I'll always get like, I'll have somebody bring a pair of pants and they're just like, oh, are you able to patch this up? Like, you probably don't have something similar. And then I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I have this scrap. Like, I save everything. And my roommates are kind of like always like, you're really bringing that into the house. It is really hard trying to like really scale up to get multiple things. And that's where I was trying to break down in my pyramid, and then also before I even get into something, trying to plan out where I'm going to get the material from. And then is there anybody really within my community that I'm also able to ask for that? Me being a seamstress, a lot of people know that that's what I do. So I have a ton of people that donate to me. And I'm also not afraid to like ask my friends, like, hey, is there any pair of like pants you no longer want? During quarantine, a ton of people were doing like spring cleaning, and I was just like, oh, I'll take it. Like, I'll figure it out. Yeah. And it's kind of like how like sometimes I will receive like the actual garment, and then that might also spark the idea afterwards. I just feel like constantly trying to repeat any of the steps are kind of a way for you to constantly be thinking about the material that exists already around you and within your community. That if you can't have it on you right now, then maybe ask a friend, like, hey, like, are you able to kind of like hold this until I'm ready? And it's just really this kind of like keeping control of what could become waste. I was very surprised to learn that so many people had no idea what to do with like the clothes that they no longer wanted. If you don't have the time to go and sell it at like a sell by trade store, people ultimately just want to like donate to the Goodwill. And then there are a few people that just really just throw it away. And that is where I was like, those are the people that I wanted to start with, that there is so many other alternatives that you can do, but then also that you can keep it. Just a lot of people just don't have the skill set of like sewing, but YouTube is amazing. And it is a kind of like an act of doing. I constantly work at sewing. When I very first started, it's kind of like it was just something that I would do. I made a lot of bad things that I was just like, these don't fit right. But I've kept material recut it when I learned a new technique, and then I would build off of the same things. I would make a pair of pants when I like back in the day didn't no longer like work out, and then I cut them up into like the pieces that I needed for a new pair of pants. So I was constantly cycling from like my old projects to become like my new is also something that I do with my own closet. And but that is kind of like how I got into manufacturing, was to kind of like quickly start like my skills in sewing, but it was also something that like I was passionate about. So I was able to do something that I liked, even though necessarily working in that environment kind of like was where I was kind of like shocked.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is a good way to like get cash while also like building your skill set. Because typically on the assembly line, you'll start with whatever their beginning line is. And then as you learn and get well at the machine, you be able to move up.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a way to like, it was a way for me to pay for school, for me to pay for college. I had to work full time, and I constantly worked on doing those type of jobs. My very first sewing job was sewing in labels. I just was the girl just to sew in labels in a brand, like local brands in Pittsburgh. I'm from Pittsburgh. And just from there is just, I just kept trickling up to the ladder. So when I finally got welcomed into like the design houses and just knowing also the back end of production is when I was just like, something's not right here. And I felt like I've needed to start with the consumers, because we're the last people to touch the clothes. Like designers might make it and manufacturers might like the design and manufacturers produce it, but we are the people that it was sold to, and we're the last people to touch it. So I feel like it's our job to keep it like from going into like waste.
That's so interesting. I'm curious what happened when I saw later in your presentation, you showed a couple of collaborations that you did with major brands. I'm really curious when you were approached by them to do this. Do you feel like your work kind of opened their eyes? Like, did you sort of sense that they were seeing you and having an aha moment about, I don't know, the larger role of fashion in environmental systems?
I think it really did. I would be talking to a lot of the designers of those companies, and they would just be like so amazed at what I was able to do from my New York apartment, using what is given to them every day. And I think it just really does like start to open their eyes about like the creativity that calls into rebuilding. It's an art form, because it's just like you have to use what is in front of you. And usually in designing, you can like make up something in your head, and like it's up to the pattern maker and it's up to the tech design like designers to figure out how that will be produced. But when you're only given what already exists, you really have to think like smarter on like how you're going to approach these, so it just doesn't look like like just somebody's grandma's like pants, like patchwork pants. You can really like yeah, it's like when I like started getting in, especially with those brands, I was just like, I knew like they made denim, so it's like I want to be able to produce that for them, since that's their norm. And I can also like open their eyes and be like, look what I can do with your own denim, what you sell every day. And then I then went into like my soft good pieces of what like spoke to me, of where I needed to like really like be smart and creative as like a pattern maker, to like be like, all right, so how do I make a plushie? like using like these like now new raw materials.
It's almost a collage type of approach, right? Where it's that type of art form. Do you, there's a question in the Q&A that I also thought was interesting about using deadstock as a material source. Is that something that you use? And if so, how do you get access to that?
Yes, actually, I've used a lot of deadstock in the past. There was a company called Bag Brothers. If anybody's looking for like military wear, they were somebody that I approached when I was doing the Alpha Industry project. Alpha knew what I did with previous military wear that I actually sourced from there. That was all dead stock military like pieces that I was able to like put together. I used pup tents. Pup tents is tents, and I made jackets, pants, a vest, and hats from these pieces, and I just kept.
You say pop tents?
Pup tents. Yes, they like will go over like boats.
Okay.
And I was like yeah, like they're used like just like in war, just kind of like quick tents to put over like equipment and stuff. But they were like really big, and like they came with a lot of like unique hardware and like sometimes roping in it. And I was like, when I actually received the first one from a friend who was just like, hey, I have actually this cool like old material that I feel like you will be interested in. And when I received it, I then did more research, and then that's how I was able to find a place to find it, deadstock. And I bought only like 3 of them, and then I used up the material till I had no more, and then there was no longer like I was no longer able to sell it. And I also kept like I did my very first like designs of like I guess the full collection, and as people like purchase, I then would make it, and then eventually that's when it would sell out. So when I no longer had like large amounts of the fabric, I was no longer able to make the jackets. So the jackets were sold out until eventually I was only able to sell the hats. And eventually everything was gone.
It gets smaller and smaller, and then soon you're just like selling tiny miniature things.
Yeah. It's just like the way that I feel able to scale like from like my larger pieces to smaller using like the scraps, because scraps in production was the biggest thing that I kept seeing getting left behind. And they're just like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And sometimes a lot of people are like, all right, well, let me start with scraps. But then you're like sitting there and you're patching for like ages. So I was just like, all right, at least for me, I like to use like, I would use my skull scraps to make little small accessories.
Yeah. So I have another question for you, which is also from the Q&A. How might we kind of invite more young people into this very technical yet very artistic line of craft and fashion and creation? Do you have any ideas for that?
I feel like I see a lot of younger people taking the craftsmanship of sewing a lot more serious than I think I ever have. But a lot of it is with conversation. I feel like I like to be very open with everybody. If anybody's just like, oh, like what sewing machines probably should I get? Like, how do I get into this? I feel like the hush hush that the industry has made for years of like where they're getting things produced or who's making it is where I'm trying to remove that from. There's so many people in New York that can sew, and so little of those people are able to have a conversation with just like regular people. Like we have a whole garment district of people that can sew, but it's as if like you have to go through Narnia to find them. And I just kind of feel like that's where the cart is, where my introduction, where somebody's ever thought like in their neighborhood on the corner of East 4th, they were going to be able to find like this resource. And me, I'm able to share with other people.
Oh, that's good. We can still hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually even more clear now.
Am I good?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes.
All right. I thought I had my headphones in, and then I think they just died. Sorry. Apologies.
It's okay. It's good. It's good. So I also just wanted to ask another question from the chat that I was wondering about as well. How do you deal with quality as you're collecting materials? Because so much of the fabric and even the trims used in fast fashion are, notoriously poor quality.
Yeah.
And a lot of the fabric itself is, some kind of like a polyester or nylon that doesn't really hold up too well. So do you tend to try to avoid using that as source material, fast fashion, or, do you is it sort of case by case, you have to touch and feel each thing?
It kind of is case by case. I do like during the cart, there are a lot of people that will bring me like a pair of jeans that they got from Forever 21 that is is mainly spandex, but instead of them throwing it away, I would want them to try to like figure out any way to keep it. I do still kind of look at all material as material. It exists. It's like tangible. So there has to be a, a source for it to go into. It has to like we just can't pick and choose. Like, oh, it's not organic cotton, so it's not sustainable. Like that's another narrative I think that usually comes through is like, well, we made this from like, bamboo cotton, so like it's okay to make like 1,000 of them. And I'm just like, I don't think that's right. I mean, it might be able to just decompose, but we have so much that has been getting ignored for years, and it exists, and we have to figure out a way to like save it. A lot of the materials that I get off of that is where I kind of like do put in more of like a creative pieces. I also have met a lady on the cart actually, and she remakes bags out of umbrella nylon that she finds in the street. So during like a storm, usually somebody's umbrella is gonna like flip over and it's gonna break, and a lot of people just happen to leave it on the sidewalk. And she collects them and she takes them apart and she reuses the umbrella fabric to make these handbags. And I was given scraps. She's like, I want to see like your interpretation of my umbrella bags, and I'm working on like my own version of like her way of using like your non-traditional like sustainable fabric to keep it cycling within like ourselves. I think that is I think that's a great challenge for a lot of people to get into, is using materials that they typically might not find, like might not want to wear, but who says that we now have to wear it? It can become a soft good. It can become a rug. It can become so much more than just clothing. It's material, and that's what we have to like always remember, that we've gotten so far in ignoring it that we have to figure out how to like bring it back and cycle and repeat. So
Yeah, I mean, I think you said something really important, which is, I guess in this era of really, really intense textile waste, I mean, we've seen what happens when, the Goodwills and the Salvation Army ship all that stuff overseas. It creates a terrible waste problem in a lot of other countries. It creates terrible waste in our ocean as well. So, I mean, I think what you're doing is kind of taking this wide open approach to just, keep it out of the landfill, and do work with it, find a way to work. You're just saying, find a way to work with it. It might not become a garment, but it can become something else. There seem to be a lot of either fashion students or aspiring designers or people who are somewhere in their journey of learning to make things in this class right now. So they're kind of blowing up the chat and the Q&A. And there's, a lot of requests for just general advice for somebody who's starting out and really believes in practicing, this kind of circular production and waste to resource paradigm. Do you have any advice for them? What were things that you leaned on when, I don't know, times were hard, or, when people didn't get what you were doing? And are there communities that you have connected with, other seamstresses, for example, or, what kind of keeps you going?
um I just it really does just kind of like mean like so much to me that I don't throw away. I also feel like it's something like I was like raised on. My family is always very resourceful. If we got given something. I have an older sister, and I got all her hand-me-downs. My hand-me-downs went to my younger sister or cousins, and that was just kind of like the narrative in our home. Coming from usually like the medium and like work or the working class is you kind of think like this where you always need to, you know, do with what you're getting. And I think I approach that also within like design and just my everyday like approach to what I want to buy. I really don't buy that much because I always think of like the opportunity cost. It will cost me to purchase something versus me making it, and then also what I'm contributing to. It's just something that I've just been trying to implement into my lifestyle, just as much as like recycling is a recycling, like, you know, your canisters, like your water bottles, those things have became like such a part of like big cities now. And I kind of like also do that when it comes to like textiles, waste material. And it's, I think I just speaking up about it has put me into the places that I needed to be to have these conversations with other people that felt the same way. And until it was something that I was always like approaching this since college, but until I was able to start the cart and like really like kind of make my own like loudspeaker, that I had no idea that there were so many people around me that also thought this way. Helen, who asked for the elephant, actually lived behind me, and she was like two streets back, and it was just crazy that that was like going on. And that's when I realized that like within our communities is a place to have these type of conversations. Starting like jacket drives for, you know, trying to like give people that usually can't get a jacket in a winter, like the same as like your community fridges is a way, is another way of like having like a community closet. Like I do think those, your within your community, I think is a way to kind of like spark these conversations and to kind of like show like like you know that like to build community of something that you like. And then also that could be a way to build like your resources when it comes to like looking for materials and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everything you make, it's so, I mean, I'm just looking at this elephant. It's so beautifully constructed as well. And you know, that's a question that came up in the from our one of our students here is how, I mean, how do you calculate what to charge somebody for something like this? This is like a bespoke, one of a kind item. It's, I mean, looking at this elephant, I can't even imagine how you constructed the ear and got it to stick up like that. And, you know, there, it's so, it takes so much skill to do this. And I can't imagine that you did it quickly. So
No,
is it a sort of like, you just talk it through with the person when you're doing this sort of bespoke piece, or how, or is just what they, yeah, how do you have that conversation?
yeah, this I honestly I talked to her on the phone for a very long time until we figured out like exactly what we were going to make. Uh she originally just like asked for a teddy bear, and I was just like, you know, I just asked like just a simple teddy. I was just like, is there anything like, does he have a favorite animal? Do you have a favorite animal? Um their last vacation together, they rode elephants. And that's where I was just like, oh, like my mom collects elephants. Their like trunk faces the door for good luck. And she's just like, oh, I have a friend that does that. And that's kind of like how we got onto this particular animal. I then sketched out a full, like, I think I have, I don't have the sketch that's on here. I thought I did, but I sketched out on paper exactly like where I was going to put the seam lines, exactly like where I thought it like made sense, or where like, a dart may need to go. The air is completely flat, and then the dart is what connects it to bell out. But then I did a thing where I printed out a photo of an elephant, and then I also like draw it over and add the seam lines, and that made sense that I knew my skill set could like do. I you know, me sewing for so long, I kind of know what I like and what I don't like. I hate roll pockets. I use the patch. I put a patch pocket on it that is an embroidered gem. But I knew that like I was able to like execute that like perfectly on like something that I wanted to give to somebody perfect. Uh yeah, it really does take time. I end up actually not charging her.
Oh my gosh.
I kind of cried when I handed it to her. I was just like, I don't know, this was the the project that really opened my eyes to like the possibilities of this particular like like with the cart I was just trying to really originally like kind of like save people's clothes and introduce them to the people that make it. But when I was able to really see the effects of what clothing means to a person and how it could like like they wanted to transpire into like the rest of their lives, is where I was just like, this thing is so much bigger than like myself. And this is where I like really needed to like, I really started pushing the cart, and I was just like, I need to do this more for like, like for my community. And it takes time and sacrifice, but I feel like the same way that you will like take time and sacrifice from splitting up your garbage correctly for the environment is the same thing that I needed to do, um, just for my like for my everyday life.
Hmm.
The cart is very time consuming. It's like it's so, I feel like it's passionate to me, and that's where I measure. I think measuring success is something that a lot of people kind of like don't ever like make like their own measure to it.
Hmm.
I feel I just was asking actually another lady from another company this yesterday, like why is it that in companies, when you're like, I worked in retail before, and they're just like, why don't you like, so last year we sold this many, so we need to like sell double that. And I was just like, why is that like a thing? Like, why
Hmm.
do you have to keep constantly selling more? And they're just like, well, that's what the economy is like. And I'm just like, so is that like, did you reach like your level of success when you did that? I feel like sometimes less is more, when you're trying to be very resourceful. If I'm if I have to scale back from making multiple things to make me becoming like a bigger designer or like a bigger brand, as long as I'm doing it ethically, like I'm happy. Like
Yeah, I mean, you are hitting the nail on the head of something so important, which is questioning that sort of commitment to growth without considering the costs. It's sort of this assumption that we have in this country and in many other global north countries that our economy should always grow or our sales targets should always double. And people don't stop to think about, who pays the price of that growth. And I really appreciate that you reached this point, so early in your um, career as an artist and a designer, where you really sort of said, oh, I'm not gonna just take those assumptions on as my own, and it really goes to show the power of critical thinking, which is something that we really, that it's the reason that we do these classes, is the reason that we do Open EDU. It's to kind of encourage people to think critically about things that are maybe just automatic in our culture, and then to imagine and innovate and find new ways of doing things. And what it sounds like to me is that in that process of questioning and using your artistic and design practice to respond to something that didn't feel right to you, and then interacting with community members, it sounds like this process with the cart changed you. You
yeah,
changed, you changed people's lives, but then they like this. What is this lovely woman's name again? Uh,
Helen.
Helen. Right. Helen changed you, right?
Yeah, no, it really did. Like the card honestly is just like it's really amazing. Like I started as an installation to kind of like get other people's conversation, and then like but I started also questioning myself, like in the midst of like the cart, when I was like working on one of the projects. It was just like, even though I could probably use all these resources to find all the random like the pup tents. I only got 3 because I could have got more. Like sometimes less is more. Like I was able to really give good quality in the time of only making a few of them instead of a lot. And it was able to show within like the actual pieces, because then people did not even know that it was wasted material. I was able to take my time and to really think about it and plan about how I was going to approach these garments, so I could take the time more and only making a few of them instead of making a ton. And I just needed to be, like it be comfortable. It is very, it's very hard. Like sometimes like I'll be like thinking and I'm just like, oh maybe sell out, buy a yacht. Like but I just know that's not where I would be happy. And so just using what I'm able to take on, or what I'm able to share and give with my friends that are also able to help me on projects, like overworking myself. And when I'm starting to feel like a machine and no longer a person of a craft, is when I'm just like, oh yeah, nah, like I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's what people as like young designers need to ask themselves, like, what are you really willing to sacrifice and want to really put into the world? Like you
Mhm.
can make something that can last a lifetime. It's just, but where is it going to be? Is it going to be in a bottom of a dump, or is it going to be something that you can keep close because you only were able to give it to and sell it to a fine few that also thought the same? And that's
Yeah.
when I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to just make things for people to like just eventually get rid of. Like I didn't want to just like give them a trend. I wanted to give them a piece of myself. And
Mhm.
when I was like working with the cart and giving myself to other people is when I was just even getting affected more, because like I was like diving into their lives.
Mhm.
And I'm just like it's a lot, but it's just so much meaningful. Like and then back to the very first quote, I feel like this last few years I have never made anything that I felt that it was going to get thrown away.
Mhm.
And that makes me feel like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just talking to you. I can feel the journey in you, if that makes sense. I can kind of see that you're a very profound person. You've been having a very profound experience with this cart, and it really shows. I am wondering if do you give workshops? Do you have a YouTube channel? Are there ways that people can support your journey as a designer and an artist and someone who is really actively every day changing the way that people think about their relationship to material things?
I really encourage people to come to the cart. If you're in New York, come and hang out. I've had students come past before and ask me about sewing techniques. I've had people sit with me as I would work. I'm completely like open to it. I feel like I want to be what I didn't get when I was starting to sew. It was very much like I was embarrassed a lot when I was having to tell my peers that were like going to like nursing school that I was going to like work on a manufacturer. And as I got older and like as I was like learning the skill set, I was like being able to be like, nah, like this is really cool. I wish that I had more mentors growing up and getting into this that were like didn't just think like, oh, we're just gonna, like didn't think like the old ways.
Mhm.
And I want to be able there to help people and to also just kind of like spark people just to do the same thing within their community. Like
Yeah.
I've had people be like, would you be upset if somebody else started a cart? I'm like, as long as they're like helping people, like I won't mind. We had a cart party for all I care. Like,
Oh, that would be amazing to have carts in every city.
yeah,
Um,
I just
and I think
like
there are a lot of people who would just love to take some classes with you. So if ever, stay in touch with Slow Factory. And if ever you do start a sort of class series or something, if your hands get a little tired and you want to, do something else for a while and you decide to teach or create a series of classes on YouTube or something, please let us know, because I can see from the chat that, you know, a lot of people are really interested in what you do philosophically, and a lot of people are also really interested in what is going on with your work technically. There's a lot of like very interesting technical questions happening in the chat that I don't really understand.
The chat? Let me see.
Yeah, so I will, maybe we can save the chat for you. I will ask, maybe one of my colleagues will be able to copy the chat so that you can have a look. We're a little bit over time. I just wanted to kind of remind everybody who is in this class right now that a lot of love and care and labor go into making every single Open EDU class happen. And so this is the time where I ask you, our community, to please, please, please consider, if you are in a position to do so, to become a monthly donor to the Slow Factory. Every little bit helps. If it's $5 a month or $100 a month, whatever is in your range. We are deeply committed to keeping these classes free and open, and having inspiring people like Makayla come and teach and skill share, and also just to kind of motivate us to think about doing things in a new way, to find a way where there is no way. So yes, please, please, please go to our website, slowfactory.earth, and there you will see lots of different options for supporting our work. And then Makayla, let's ask maybe one of my colleagues to just drop your Instagram or your social media handle in the chat as well. If you have also a Cash App or Venmo in your bio, that's another way that people can just, you know, support your work. And please do, you're definitely going to see me. I'm going to bring my teenage daughter who's really into fashion. I'm going to bring her by your cart to meet you. I'm going to have her watch this recording first, the recording of this class. I think she's going to be deeply inspired by what you're doing. Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you. This was one of those conversations that really, it uplifted me so much.
Thank you so much. I was like tripping
Yeah.
up there for a minute.
Too. I'm so moved by what you're doing and how you're doing it. The spirit, it's not just what you're doing and the regenerative and sustainable nature of it, but it's like the spirit that you're bringing to it. This is what it's all about, right? You're building community as you're keeping things out of the landfill and out of our water, and you're making connections. And look at Helen, look at her face. You're bringing
She's the sweetest.
joy. Yes.
We still talk. Like I hit her on holidays.
I love it. You're getting lots of flowers in the
Thank you guys so much.
So thank you so much for this wonderful class. And to all our students, the recording for this class should be up in about a week or so. So keep an eye out. And also on our website, if you go to the Open EDU section, all of our class recordings are available. I mean, you could get a serious education in anti-coloniality, in regenerative systems, in upcycling, in, you know, racial politics. I mean, just lots and lots of great material there. So I encourage everyone to go and look back on what we've already done up to this point. So thank you, Makayla, from the bottom of my heart. I know that I'm leaving this conversation feeling super, I don't know, just uplifted.
I know it's like nice out today, so I think maybe I'll go out to the cart.
Yes.
Usually I'm closed on the weekend, so but now I'm kind of like, yeah, I need to go.
Do it. Okay.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
And thank you to Jenny and Antonio for all of their skillful interpretation as well. Always wonderful to know that we have this incredible sort of community of interpreters as well, who help us make sure that all of these beautiful offerings are accessible. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.